After a while, Cecil arrives at the gate of the prison, but he is confronted by the Suicide Squad. Meanwhile, Clayface recalls that this is the man who sent them to prison. Thus, they begin to mock Cecil. Although Cecil can't understand them, he realizes they're mocking him. As a result, Cecil throws his sword at Harley, but King Shark comes in between and swallows the sword. In response, Cecil uses his bracelet and calls his sword back. As a result, King Shark gets a huge wound in his stomach. However, King Shark's wound heals instantly because of his super healing ability. Thus, the Suicide Squad prepares to fight, but suddenly Rick Flag steps in. He then urges everyone to stop. He also implies that fighting the Knights would turn the entire country against them, making it impossible to return to the chopper and reset their bomb timers. Rick then reveals that he learned the language of this world. Thus, he decides to negotiate with Cecil. He implies that he doesn't want to fight. Funnily enough, Cecil understands him, but the phrases Rick learned in prison are full of insults. Thus, it makes Cecil very upset. He prepares to attack, but then he remembers that Fiona personally asked for his help. As a result, he decides to take them to Queen Aldora. By the way, Fiona seems interested in Harley. Since they couldn't understand each other, Queen Aldora decides to cast a spell that allowed them to communicate using the language of the world. Thus, Rick respectfully approaches the Queen and expresses his desire to make an offer that will greatly benefit their kingdom. In exchange, he asks for their freedom. However, they remind him that he is still a prisoner and has no right to make an offer. Rick still insists that he has important information that can help them win the war. He reveals that the Empire replaced all its top officers with humans from their world. In other words, the Suicide Squad Rick came with. Meanwhile, as usual, the Suicide Squad starts their shenanigans. But before Rick can explain, the Suicide Squad starts blaming everything on Rick. Well, Rick led the previous Suicide Squad to this world, but due to his incompetence, they betrayed Rick and joined the Empire. As her soldiers draw their swords on them, Peacemaker steps up and offers to fight on any battlefield to make things right. Meanwhile, the Queen uses her magic to restrain Rick and orders her troops to take him away. She gives a stern warning to the Suicide Squad: keep Peacemaker's promise or Rick pays the price. Before leaving, Rick reminds the squad that he's the only one who can reset their bomb timers. In other words, if he dies, they will never make it to the chopper and lose their heads too. Harley then tells the Queen that they will need their weapons and gear back. After the preparation, they head to the battlefield. After that, we can see Kingdom soldiers are trying to seize a fortress from the Empire's control. Clayface proposes to lend them a hand, but Deadshot disagrees. He then reminds them that Cecil had earlier advised them to stay out of their fight. Harley informs the squad that Cecil and others are fighting brainwashed animals. After pondering about obedient animals, Deadshot realizes that the commander is probably a friend from his prison days. So he suggests going inside the fortress to talk things out. Thus, they go to the side of the fortress. Thanks to Clayface, they manage to get inside. After that, Deadshot bumps into Ratcatcher and warmly greets him. Meanwhile, Ratcatcher is taken aback to see Deadshot. Deadshot also calls him his buddy. However, Ratcatcher isn't exactly thrilled to see him. The backstory is that Ratcatcher was often bullied by other prisoners for being a weirdo during his time in prison. Deadshot, in an attempt to help, ended up making Ratcatcher feel worse without realizing it. Deadshot thought he was being friendly, but his constant meddling only made the situation worse. With that being said, Ratcatcher set those wolves on Deadshot and others. As a result, a fight between both parties breaks out. Peacemaker realizes they're outnumbered. Thus, he decides that the best course of action is to eliminate Ratcatcher. He takes a shot at Ratcatcher, but one of Ratcatcher's wolves jumps in and shields him. Clayface then spots huge water tanks overhead. Deadshot takes a shot at them, causing a flood on the roof. With the ground now wet, Clayface uses his powers to control the walls of the fortress. This makes the wolves lose their footing and fall. Peacemaker tries to shoot Ratcatcher again, but out of nowhere, Katana shows up to protect him. Seeing Katana, Harley can't hide her anger. By the way, as a result of their fight, the whole fortress falls to the ground. Needless to say, Cecil is very angry at the Suicide Squad.